Joe, I'm now going to ask you a series of questions that I've been referring to as my rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I think I am.
Okay. When did you first know that you wanted to be a lawyer?
I would say probably in 7th grade, give or take a year or two. I had a teacher who said, "You are one of the most annoying students I've ever had. You never shut up and won't stop arguing." And I thought, I better find a way to make a living doing that. So that was probably the first time I thought about it. When I was in college, I majored in philosophy, so that was pretty much going all in. Because I don't know what in the world I would have done otherwise at that point, except maybe be homeless. So yeah, that was the plan.
Do you have a favorite attorney to litigate against?
I will say this, there are several very sophisticated and very skilled defense attorneys that I often encounter, given that, defense attorneys inhabit this space and you see the same people a lot. I will say, generally speaking, that I always prefer to litigate against those types of people, even though they're going to bring the fight, and even though they're going to represent their client, as zealously and as aggressively as they have to. The difference is that they do so civilly, reasonably, and they know how to think about cases the right way. It doesn't mean we're going to settle every time, but it does mean that they know how to have the conversation and when to have it. And when you are litigating against someone who isn't maybe as familiar with the class action area, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into just getting them to that point. So when I see a name that I recognize on the other side, as formidable as they may be, I think, okay, that's probably a good sign for the future of the case.
That's a good answer, but I want you to name names.
Well, I will say this. There are 2 or 3 guys that I've had several cases with just recently. Mark Mester from Latham & Watkins was the first chair litigator in the NCAA concussion litigation. I also have a case against Western Union where Mark is the top guy in the Energizer sunscreen litigation that our firm had. That involved sunscreen that was setting people on fire. It's a story I'll tell you over a drink. Mark had the defendant in that one. So I've gotten to know Mark very well. Martin Jasek and David Almeida are also 2 guys that I've had many TCPA cases against, who are also very smart, sharp litigators. So does that count as naming names?
Indeed it does.
Okay.
Thank you. What do you believe the biggest challenge to the class action landscape over the past 5 years has been?
I would say that the 2 decisions that come to mind that really changed the landscape are first and foremost Concepcion. I mean, that's probably the same answer that you get from everyone, but it's true. I can't think of another case that from the plaintiff's perspective has been as catastrophic as Concepcion has turned out to be. I mean, you often have situations, and Clapper, by the way, is the one I was going to say is number 2, because it enabled these defendants to make all these arguments in the data breach context that, have had traction at the district court level, rightly or wrongly. But the reason why Concepcion is so much more dangerous than even Clapper, than even Dukes, or anything like that, is because it wasn't even about who's right or who's wrong on the merits. It was basically preventing people from even getting to that point. It has acted, in my opinion, and I think probably the opinion of many others, as a complete exculpatory mechanism, a complete get-out-of-jail-free card where defendants who engaged in practices that would otherwise have been, they would have been dead in the water. Those same cases, now they get out of jail free. And it's unbelievable to think that that decision has had that much effect, but I think that's the reality. So that's my number 1. Okay. What I'm really saying, if I may be blunt, is that Deepak is to blame for everything. And the good news is that he's known by his first name only. So, you're doing well in life if you're like Cher or Kramer from Seinfeld. And I don't have that status. But I blame Deepak for everything.
Well, Deepak seems a little bit more distinct than yours.
That's true, so he's got a built-in advantage.
Right. Well, Siprut, there's your one name.
Well, right now, we're making this moment number 1. I will be known only as Siprut.
What's the best legal movie?
Few Good Men. Few Good Men because I can remember vividly watching that movie over and over again when I was in high school and really starting to, come alive with energy and, some enthusiasm for the practice of law as a career. Nothing ever got me so fired up as that movie did. And, Colonel Nathan Jessup, there's been so many good parodies of that cross-examination scene.
Sure.
For the YouTube video footage alone, I would nominate A Few Good Men.
What's the best non-legal movie?
The best non-legal movie? Boy, that's a tough one. I don't get the opportunity to see movies nearly as much as I'd like. I've got a list of about 150 that I need to get to, and I'm trying to find the time. I need to hire more people, and then maybe I'll work on it. I can tell you that the one that comes to mind first is the Godfather series. Just a really interesting, it sounds cliche, and that's okay though, because if everyone says that that's their number one, it must be a good movie. And I really enjoy to this day watching all of them. Not number 3 though. Number 3 was awful. Yeah, I wanted my money back after I saw that one. First 2 though were pretty good.
Is there a particular book that you've gifted more than any other book in your career?
Devil in the White City. I bought like 20 copies of that when it came out, and I still have 3 or 4 left, and I give them to people. I don't think I've sent one to you yet, which means now you know where your stock is. But the people whose stock was higher, I gave them a copy of that book because everyone loves it. I mean, it's impossible to read the book and not be mesmerized. And here, if you live in Chicago, it has, a double sort of sense of importance because I learned a lot about Chicago history.
Well, that's extremely flattering. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What was your least favorite law school class?
My least favorite law school class, anything taken in my 3rd year, because by that point I was completely mentally checked out and to a large extent physically checked out, although I did show up for the final exams. So the 3rd year, by that point, I was ready to get out there and try to light the world on fire. The 1st year, I will tell you, you didn't ask this question, but I'll answer it. My favorite class was 1st year contracts, because that, more than anything else to this day, really changed the way I think and helped me to understand what people mean when they say how to think like a lawyer. I can remember going into that class every day and feeling like my mind was being blown, and that was a lot of fun. The only thing I can think of that was comparable was when I was like a sophomore in college and took my first philosophy class. And, every day it was just so much fun to like have my mind literally blown and just change the way I think about things. So that was a very fun time. And now, all these years later, I'm all, entrenched in my ways, and I don't know if it's possible to have my mind blown again, but hopefully something fun will come along.
What is the biggest growth area in class action law?
I think that if a lot will depend on what happens with some of these privacy cases that are pending right now. I think that if Concepcion, I cited Concepcion and Clapper as 2 very dangerous decisions that have changed a lot of what class action law looks like in the last 5 years. If those 2 cases, if the effect of them is undermined or negated, whether by legislation or whether through other subsequent decisions that chip away, I think that will lead to those 2 areas becoming growth areas, meaning privacy cases generally, as more and more companies continue to collect vast amounts of information, and as they acquire the tools technologically to amass these amazing stockpiles of data, it's almost like an accident waiting to happen. So as long as the law gives people a path to the courthouse, we will see those cases filed. In Concepcion, I have probably 50 cases in my hopper that are not going anywhere anytime soon because of Concepcion, but the day that we can do something about that case, I'm going to file 50 cases that I've got in the hopper, so keep your eye on the docket. That's a promise.
So I'm reasonably certain I know the answer to this question already, but what is a worst case for a plaintiff's bar in your opinion? Carrera, Concepcion, or Dukes?
I would say far and away Concepcion. Dukes, is of course problematic in many ways for the plaintiffs, but the difference is that, there are ways to basically craft your class definition, to craft your, method of proof around Dukes, and exactly what Dukes means is itself the subject of some amount of debate.
Sure.
Whereas Concepcion continues to be in a league of its own because it just kills entire lines of cases that would otherwise have merit, and therefore, far and away, that's the worst.
What is the most worthy legal nonprofit?
There are a lot of really worthy nonprofits that are doing important work. 2 of the ones that I've had a lot of interactions with, and I've been just really impressed by the quality of their talent, is Public Citizen and Public Justice. I like to support them any way I can. I'm on the board of Public Citizen. I think that we need more organizations like that, quite frankly, and I think that they would hopefully tell you the same thing. Their work makes a difference, a tangible difference in the law. It's at the margins, like most advocacy, but it's making a difference.
Would you advise the next generation to go to law school?
I think that if someone comes to me and they have a burning desire to be a lawyer because that's what they want to do, I would never in a million years try to tell that person not to go to law school. I don't care what the economy is like. I don't care what the commentators are saying or the consultants. If someone says, I want to be a lawyer, I say, then you should be a lawyer. The type of person who would get different advice, however, is the kind of person, and frankly, this is probably most of them, who don't necessarily want to be a lawyer. That's not their calling in life. They just don't know. So, they might get a PhD in history. They might travel the world for a couple of years. They might go to law school and then maybe go work in-house for a company, maybe an MBA. Those are the people where I say, you might want to think long and hard about this because I'm not quite sure it makes sense for you to spend the time and money to get a law degree given the economic return. But philosophically, if you have the fire in your belly, don't let anyone tell you not to do it.
In your opinion, what is the most beautiful courthouse in the United States?
I would say that the Northern District of Illinois courtrooms are quite beautiful. I was never a fan of the building itself. I think it's incredibly bland from the exterior. The lobbies and so forth are really nothing much to look at either. But the inside of the courtrooms themselves is actually pretty impressive. And so when I have counsel from out of town coming in and so forth, I always make a note of the fact that they're always impressed, which tells me something about the quality elsewhere. I think that the Daily Center is a place to be avoided at all costs here in Chicago. It's not fun, it's not glamorous, but sometimes the law is in the trenches.
Sure. In conclusion, if you had one poignant piece of advice to impart upon a young lawyer, what would that advice be?
I think the key is to be authentic and to be yourself. That's a big thing for me, and I try to teach that to the associates who work at my firm. I think that the very best lawyers are the ones who have crafted their own style and made it work for them, but the way that it works for them, if they're lucky, is that it just rings true and it's authentic, that establishes credibility, it establishes honesty. I can remember learning this lesson quite vividly when I was in law school, trying to do a closing argument for advanced trial advocacy or whatever it was, and getting my hands on transcripts from great trial lawyers who had done amazing closing arguments that were famous, and basically trying to steal all of their little anecdotes that they told about when they were a child growing up and they worked in a rope factory and the wheels of justice and all these other metaphors they worked in. I remember trying to combine the best of them and using those in my argument, and when it was over, the mock jurors all said, "We liked your closing argument. The substance was all great. What was all that junk about the rope factory and everything else?" I realized that it just didn't work because it wasn't really true. It has to be authentic. I'm not going to wear cowboy boots and a huge belt buckle when I go into court in Texas because they're going to see that coming a mile away. So keep your eyes open. Look at what works for other people. See how successful attorneys, conduct themselves, but always be true to yourself and be authentic, because if you're not, people will smell it a mile away and it will not work.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.